All right, so I'm Dr. Rachel, and I know sex, and I am here with the man who knows sex. Mr. Marcus is joining me today. So we've got a couple things to talk about, and the biggest one that I want to ask you is, being a guy that's been in the industry for almost going on 20 years now, what is the biggest change you've seen in the adult film industry from where it used to be to where it is now?
Right. I think the biggest change is there's more people doing it. You know, it went from like certain type of girl to the girl next door. And that's because of the internet. I think technology has propelled porn. It made it more accessible, and it's also, you know, put it in more people's hands. You know, it's not underneath the mattress anymore.
Now, how does that affect your bottom line then? I mean, like, because part of this is economics. So how does it affect a professional? Because, you know, you know how to do this. You could do this probably blindfolded. And then you have all the amateurs coming through. Does that affect the bottom line?
Nah, you know, it doesn't affect me. You know, I kind of created my own lane, and you know, I stay true to the sex. There's no gimmick, there's no niche. It's just about the sex. And so for that, you know, there's no competition.
That's great. That's great. Now, you made it sexy to wear a hat during sex. You know? So Mr. Marcus is the gentleman that probably, if your guy shows up in the bedroom with a hat on, it's because he's seen one of your movies.
Right, right.
So in terms of that, if you had to pick one thing that you would say you're the proudest of in terms of your performance and stuff, what would that be? What's your one thing that you brought to the industry?
Probably, I mean, I don't know. I like using the word stamina. Longevity.
Definitely. So I thought that some of that was camera tricks. Is that camera tricks or is that actual stamina?
Nah, I mean, a good editor helps.
Okay.
You know, but he got to work with something, so I do my best, you know, to make it last as long as possible.
Okay, good. Now, bringing that up then, so if you had to give that tip to the guys, like, because, you know, being a sexologist, that's the number one thing guys ask is, how can I last longer? How can I be bigger? If you had to tell them, you know, how can you last longer, what would be your tip?
Well, I mean, a lot of things take practice. You know, don't expect to get with a woman and be, you know, everything she wants. Because usually you can be, and then it'll go downhill from there. Sometimes it's cool to start at the bottom and work your way up, kind of fill each other out. Because I've been with girls that were maybe, it started out great, and then it just kind of didn't really continue. But then I've been with girls where we took the time to learn about each other's bodies and kind of figure out and it's a trust thing, because, you know, you're always like, oh, let me do it, oh, I'll do it, and you're dominating. But then you get to a point where you're comfortable with each other, and then she just kind of let the woman do her thing, and it's a teamwork.
Yeah, team effort.
It's team effort, you know.
Okay, you know, there was this movie that came out recently called The Numbers, where all the ladies were trying to figure out, counting the numbers of guys that they'd been with, and they were counting them, and some were embarrassed and some weren't. Being an adult film star, do you know how many women you've been with? Like, have you?
Nah, I mean, people ask me that before, and then sometimes it's just rude.
Yeah.
Like you don't want to know. Okay,
so you know, with that being the case, and I know with the industry, there's a couple, like for instance, Vivid Entertainment. I know they require the actresses and actors to wear condoms.
Well, they're condom optional.
Okay.
Yeah, them and Wicked. Wicked is condom, you know, mandatory.
Okay.
But Vivid is optional. You can, if you want to wear condoms, you can.
You can. Okay, and you've been very vocal throughout that, pretty much, about your opinions as to whether or not people should be required to wear condoms during adult movies. What are your opinions on that?
I'm optional. I believe it's your choice. I don't think we should force it upon someone, especially when they're consenting adults, because you know, women and men, you know, it's always men get the blame for not wanting to wear condoms, but women are the same way. There are women out there who don't want to have it worn either, and I think that speaks. And you know, if we enforce our testing is pretty rigorous, and it's continuous. You know, it kind of overlaps. We get tested so much that, you know, I trust our testing system, and I think it's something that can, you know, puts us ahead of the crowd when it comes to that, because there is so much sex and there is that testing. But if you throw condoms in the mix, it's not a bad thing. I just don't think that you should force a group of people that are willing to do it and consenting to do it however they want to do it.
Now, you mentioned that you trust the system. And I have to go there because recently, for the audience that doesn't know, the porn industry had to shut down a few days because you tested positive for syphilis.
Mm-hmm.
And can you talk a little bit about what happened? Because there's some alternating stories as to how that happened and how you ended up transmitting it to other people.
Well, in my case, I didn't know I didn't really recognize the symptoms of syphilis because in our industry, we only test for it twice a year.
Okay.
So every 6 months, we're testing for this. We're testing for chlamydia, gonorrhea, and HIV every month.
Okay.
And during this period, we hadn't been testing for syphilis. And so I'm getting tests and working as normal, but, I'm taking the test like everybody else, but we're not taking a syphilis test. And I'm not thinking about syphilis.
Mm-hmm.
No one in our industry is thinking about syphilis.
No one in America is thinking about syphilis.
Right. It's, the numbers were low. I mean, it had, but there's a resurgence of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, there was a breakout in Europe, some girls that came here and worked, and then they went there. And so we're trying to identify, but it's kind of hard when some of the people are halfway, across the country, right, on the other side of the world. I got caught up in it because I went to my private doctor because I wasn't feeling right, and I was starting to see symptoms that just going on in my body. Something wasn't right. I thought it was stress.
Yeah.
I thought it was something internal, and I kept thinking, well, maybe it's just because I'm stressed out. And
what were some? Were you losing weight? What were some of the symptoms?
You get a rash, and you get a rash in places. It can be around your genitals, or it can be what I started to get was rashes around my hands. And it was freaking me out. And I was showing people because I was like, what is this? I'm just expecting someone to have the answers.
Right.
And people were just like, just go to the doctor. I tried lotion. I tried, vitamins.
Hydrocortisone, probably.
Right. Whatever I can get my hands on. I was just I thought maybe it was just a skin thing. I thought it was just continuing from the stress. And I went to my doctor, and he says, blood. He said, it looks like syphilis, and we'll do a blood test. And came back, I was positive with syphilis. And then, me being the performer that I am and being in the industry I am, it kind of made the industry like, whoa, you know.
How did you feel when you got that, when he told you that? Were you?
He made no big deal about it because it's, the mistake I made was thinking it was like a virus or a disease, and it was going to, but he was, very specific. Get a shot. He told me to come back at the end of the year and we'll test you again because syphilis has a way of the antibodies or something staying in your system.
So he was just giving you one shot?
Right.
Okay.
Right, based off the symptoms and how long, he could tell. And I guess there's a titer number?
A titer, yes.
Titer. Based on that number, he said,
Okay, so a titer, for those of you who are watching, basically means how many particles of this are in your bloodstream at the time.
Right.
So he probably said, well, your titer is kind of low, you are positive, so if we do this one shot, it'll probably knock it out. So he never said, come back and we'll retest you to make sure the titer has decreased more. He just said 10 days later, you should be fine.
Right, right.
Okay.
So I went, and so that was through my personal doctor.
Yes.
Then I went through our industry, following into the regiment that I've been used to every 30 days getting a test. I went to get the test for the HIV, the gonorrheas, and the chlamydia, and then the number was still there.
Okay, how many days later is this?
This was like a week, 1 week later.
Okay.
Yeah, a little over a week, like 8 days.
Okay.
So, now I'm worried because I'm like, what is that, And I talked to the doctor, and then that's when he explained that this number would be there. But there was medicine. I did the shot the next day. And
so they give you a second shot?
Well, no, I did the shot back when I first found out I had it.
Okay.
Right. And then I let that time elapse, went and got the normal test that I...
And the normal test doesn't even test for syphilis, though.
Right. But because this specific time we were starting to...
Oh, I see.
It was all a matter of timing.
Yeah,
It was a coincidence. It was like, for me, it felt like I was on it was two trains going to collide. No matter how much I wanted to avoid it, it was going to happen. Because I wanted to deal with this privately.
Yes.
And I thought to myself, deal with it privately. Because part of me felt like it would be a big deal, and I didn't want it to be a big deal.
Right. So had you had sex with anybody between the two tests?
No.
No. Okay.
No.
And so when you went to the second, the industry doctor, he tells you, well, you know, you have syphilis, and you tell him I've had a shot and everything. And does he basically say, oh, okay, well, if you've been treated, then that's fine?
Right. Right. Yeah. He reiterated the same fact. And you know, it was my doctor that gave me the diagnosis, and it was the different place where I went and actually got the shot.
I see.
Right. And I went back to after I got the shot, and then I found out that the titer number was going to be there. I was like, okay.
Does your family doctor know what business you're in?
No.
Okay. So this is the thing. So he didn't really even know, doesn't know much about you. And
Right.
it's just, have you gotten a new doctor since this happened? I have to ask.
Right.
So,
right.
Okay.
Well, you know, it's funny because I rarely get sick, man. I you know, 18 years in this business, I barely caught anything.
Yeah.
You know, and
I think you had, maybe you talked about one more scare that you had when you were married. Did you have a? I thought I read I heard you in an interview say something about, you know, kind of when you were early into the business, you did catch. I don't know.
Oh, like chlamydia or something. Yeah, I probably did. And you know, early on, you kind of, I don't know, this theory can be debated, but most men in the business tend to build up immune to stuff like this. You know, there's a lot of guys that have been working as long as I have, and you know, we're all like, you catch, you know, you just, chlamydia and gonorrhea kind of like, you know,
kind of like a cough, like a common cold.
Right. It just, I don't know. It's just so, you know, when this happened to me, you know, I was trying to deal with it in a private matter, and I thought it was like, you know, bring your stress down. Oh yeah, get this shot. Okay, you'll be fine. And my thinking was just to, you know, get back to normal.
Okay.
You know, the rashes went away. You know, like within that 7-day period, and I started feeling better, and everything looked better, and you know.
So then you started, you said, okay, so I'm over it. And so how did you get from testing positive in both of those places to going straight back to work?
Well, our testing, you know, now they have 2 tests. That one checks for your syphilis if you never had it. And then there's a test that we use that's tests for syphilis if you've had it before. So that those numbers are, even though you've been treated, and you're not infectious anymore. Right. So then you get the cosign on the doctor. Well, I didn't have the cosign on the doctor, but I had the amount of time that I had from taking the shot and getting to the point where I'm at, it was like 11 days now. Okay. And I looked at the symptoms and you know, from everything I can gather from the doctors that I talked to, the things I read online, was that I was okay again. Right,
and so you went back to work.
Right.
Now, what did you show them? Because I understand you have to show them documents when you say I've been tested and everything's okay.
Right.
How did you alter the paperwork to make
it was 2 things. Okay. You know, I went to the doctors and I asked them, our testing facility, and I said, okay, I need to get back to work. Yeah. And I've had this medicine in my system for a lot of time. You know, symptoms are gone. You know, what can I do to go back to work? And the doctor, one of the clinicians there said that, okay, well, we can remove that part of your test and just keep it, because you gotta understand there's 2 testing facilities in our industry, and one wasn't even testing for syphilis
at all.
Right, and they weren't gonna start until September. And they were the hierarchy. They were the people that kind of...
You talk about the timing, but timing is important with syphilis. So, I mean, it was such a beautiful thing that you even found out that you had it, because most people can walk around with it for years and never get tested and never know.
Well, yeah.
End up with neurosyphilis. Right. So, I mean, your time, it's like you had angels looking out for you on getting treated. Right. So that's the good thing. You
know, if it was up to me, I would have got treated a long time ago. I would have caught...
You'd have known.
I would have caught it immediately and be like, oh, you know... But I didn't know.
Yeah.
You know, I did not know what the symptoms were. They call it the imitator, because it looks like other stuff. Right.
So you know, in the media, they're saying that you fraudulently did your paperwork.
I just didn't. I didn't disclose my results for the syphilis because I've been treated. I've been taken care of. We weren't required to show that part. Yeah. That was like something new, and it wasn't something that was mandatory that we show each other. You know, there's barely you know, the way, and one of the, I don't know, one of the problems or loopholes was that I was a well-known performer.
Right.
And a lot of times I wasn't really asked to show my test. I'd show up on set, me and the girl, and most of the times either the producer had looked it up online or he kind of left it in the hands of the talent. And the talent would just kind of sign off on each other and go ahead and start working. So, you know, that helped propel things forward.
Sure.
You know,
because it's kind of a culture of everybody's comfortable with you, you're comfortable with everybody, it just kind of goes.
Right.
So in terms of your colleagues now, how are they treating you? Are they treating you
that's all
differently,
changed now.
Oh, okay.
I've become the black, you know, sheep of the industry and blackballed and just kind of, you know, a lot of bitterness, a lot of disappointment. That was the first thing, because what was, you know, a girl put it, you know, eloquently. She texted me, she says, if you just would have came out and said you had it, we could have dealt with it, because she said it's an annoying disease, but it's curable. Or it's annoying, it's an annoying disease, but it's curable. And then, but because you didn't do it that way, and you probably would have been seen as a good example, but because you didn't do it that way, you know, you've opened up a Pandora's box of things for you and the industry.
Well, you know, I know one of the big things is you never want to disappoint your fans and your family. I know you're very close to your family, your mom, your dad, your kids. Recently just lost your sister, so your family is just trying to, you know, make it through. When this happened and this hit, how did your family respond? What were some of the advice that your dad gave you?
Well, it was really my mom. You know, most of the people that are really genuine, true people, they all say the same thing: this too shall pass.
Yes.
And the barrage of criticism and you know, hindsight's 20/20, and just, you know, just by who I am in the industry and how long I've been around and how outspoken I am, it was just really a lot of bad judgment on my part. There was things in our industry that could have been done better, like the testing facility. You know, a doctor would have like said, well, let's, you know. Yes. You know what I mean?
Think if the doctors had stepped in and did,
you know, because there was two separate. It was doctors that were outside the industry, and then there was no doctors within the industry.
Sure.
You're dealing with clinicians that are just basically taking your blood and
giving you the results and saying, yeah, fine. Okay.
Right.
Well, with that being said, you're dealing with this concept of the people who used to trust you kind of don't anymore. So what's next? What are you? You know, where do you see this propelling? Because, you know, you get lemons, you make lemonade, you know. So what's next for Mr. Marcus, and where are things headed?
Well, you know, I have a pretty good fan base. And thank God they kind of stepped up. Sure. And it was, you know, and it was cured a long time ago. Yeah. You know, so you gotta deal with, you have a certain amount of people that are misinformed, think you're still running around with it. And so you gotta convince those people you're cool, and then you deal with your industry, try to educate your industry and we have better procedures now because of this. Now we test for syphilis every month. You know, now the facility that I went through to get the testing now has a doctor. They brought in the two different types of tests because they found out there were people in the industry who had syphilis prior. Because of the test that they were taking, they were going to have some kind of reactiveness to their test. There's going to be a TTR number for them, even though it's low and they're not infectious, but they still needed to acknowledge those people and sign them off to continue to work. Exactly. So that's changed. And as far as me, I just said, okay, you know, I'm still Mr. Marcus.
Yeah, that's
you know,
right.
I have 18 years in the business. You know, if anybody can go through something like this, me. You
can, yes, and you'll still be standing at the end of the day. So, for those of you who don't know anything about syphilis, yes, it is a very treatable illness, but you got to be tested for it, and you got to know you had it. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. I know this has been a tough time for you and your family, and you know, I've been rooting for you through the whole thing. I really respect the way that you handled it. You came out and said, I made a mistake, and I'm going to do better, and what more could we ask from you for that?
Right.
All right, so I really appreciate it.
No problem.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Don't forget to click on one of the arrows to see our most commented videos.